everybody, envelopers, DAO fans, and Web3 lovers. This is another episode of the DAO Envelop podcast. We are continuing to explore what's going on in the Web3 world and how Web3 changes the world we are familiar with, the world we've been living for decades. And let me announce my today's guest. He's Jake Craven. He's the co-founder of LeagueDAO, and LeagueDAO is a DAO-first open source protocol developing tokenized fantasy, sports, and play-to-earn gaming. So this episode is totally dedicated for sports fans from the real world. LeagueDAO enables a global community of fans to collectively play, build, and define the future of fantasy gaming. Is that correct, Jake? Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, that is correct.
Sounds amazing. Sounds amazing. I'm extremely interested in our today's talk. And let's start with you are a totally blockchain experienced gentleman. So tell us your story. How did you get into the blockchain space? What was your story? What were your main incentives? And are you satisfied to stay in the blockchain space for today?
Yeah. So I started my career actually in the entertainment industry, working with independent filmmakers and creators and helping them with creative distribution of their films. And I was fortunate that started my career working at a Web2 startup that was a mix between a crowdfunding platform and a ticketing platform. So crowdsourcing events. And what I quickly realized in that work and with some of the success we had there was the most valuable thing we were doing was because we were our own ticketing platform, we were selling tickets and collecting the user data of people who were buying tickets and giving that data to the creators. So then the creators actually knew who was watching their movies, who was going to their screenings of their films, when traditionally, creators don't have any access to that information. They really don't. And so that sort of sent me down the thread of how access to data and the ability to utilize data in real time can create new opportunities for creators and in the economic sense. And that's also about the time when I started to dive into the world of blockchain and DLT and Web3, whatever you want to call it. So in 2017, I made the move to a blockchain entertainment company, sort of entertainment studio, where it was a mix of building tools specifically for filmmakers and creators using blockchain and smart contracts, tokenizing intellectual property, and creating a stronger connection between fans and those creators. And so I was there for an extensive amount of time and mixed my time between managing and working with creators and licensing content and films and releasing films and marketing and all that fun stuff, and also leading dev teams and specifically building software that takes sort of all the back-end accounting and the waterfall and economic management that happens with intellectual property, whether it's films, music, and which is just a nightmare. Which is sort of a lot of my experience in this industry. I have a lot of knowledge and firsthand experience with that. And that's where we were building out a smart contract system to be able to kind of create this framework. And the level of complexity that we were with what we were doing and how we were able to achieve that in terms of from a dev standpoint, that also opened me up, to a lot of the, like the emergence of layer twos. So, we were building on Polygon at a very early stage, and, really seeing, the limitations because of building on layer one on the mainnet and things like that. And so along the way, I had a conversation. It was actually just a Zoom call because we were working on a similar project together with Tyler, the co-founder of LeagueDAO, Tyler Ward. And this was I want to say around the summer of 2020. And we were waiting for another person to join the Zoom call. And I had actually just by chance had just uncovered this sort of treasure trove of baseball, basketball, and football trading cards that my dad had collected in the 70s and 80s. And it was just like, I was going through this like massive collection that was like stored in the back of a closet. And so on my mind, I was thinking about sports and trading cards and collectibles. And we were also talking about NFTs. And this is right, this is during DeFi summer, before the NFTs really started to take off. And the conversation we were having was also around just fantasy sports, because football season was starting. So it was like, collectibles, sports, NFTs. This is kind of what we were talking about. And at the time, I was really thinking and was really most interested in, okay, how can you build utility into NFTs? Like where, how can they be used? I understood how they could be used as game pieces in like the AAA games, and that component. But I was also thinking about just in terms of like fantasy sports, but also because we were in the midst of DeFi summer, how DeFi could play a role in that, and how you could also combine that. And I think that's ultimately for me still the most exciting thing, is like the interoperability, like the Legos of it all, and the fact that we can take NFTs and DeFi and combine them in interesting ways. And so that sort of set a spark in my head. And over the next however many months, I kind of kept working on the architecture and the core idea for what would become LeagueDAO's, our first sort of core protocol that we launched. And then it wasn't until the summer of 2021, so basically a year later, last summer, Tyler and I sort of reconnected on this thread because football season was starting up again, and there were a lot of people, a lot of Web3 founders that we know and have good relationships with, that wanted to play fantasy football. And that's where Tyler and I decided, well, I'm also building this thing, and people want to play, a bunch of degens want to get in on a fantasy league. So why don't we like combine them and use this to bootstrap what will become this bigger project? And that's what we call LeagueDAO. So that's where we are today.
Well, I would say you are a versatile person. You are not a sort of blockchain developer geek who is introvert sitting at a Web3 and coding and so on and so forth. And that's great, because you do really understand how the real world works, how the sports works for decades, and you do understand these problems, especially in Web2 realm. And I really loved your Medium post, because the story of LeagueDAO is completely written there, and in white paper. It's like a literature story. I was excited to read when I was making the questions. And, honestly saying, I'm not familiar with the concept of fantasy sports. May explain for our viewers what is this and what are these problems into Web2 realm, and how tokenization and Web3 may disrupt this realm.
So fantasy sports is a whole industry of gaming. I mean, it's it's $1 billion industry at this point. There are hundreds of millions of people that participate in fantasy sports throughout the year, and it really is. It's what it is taking being a fan of sports and gamifying it. So you are where the users are creating their own teams of real world players, and then they score points based on how those players perform. And so then they're competing against other teams and their friends, but you're effectively creating your own team of your favorite players and then trading players. But it's it is in a lot of ways it enhances sort of the viewing experience of sports, because now you can watch a team you don't normally care about, but there happens to be a player on that team that's on your fantasy team, and so you're invested and you want to see them do well. So it's something fantasy sports started in maybe like 70s or 80s. And it was groups of friends just sort of creating these little, like what they called rotisserie leagues. And you have a draft where everyone gets to draft their players. And, and a lot of people have been playing fantasy sports with like the same group of friends they've had for years, and there are fantasy football leagues in the US that people have had, for decades at this point. And it really is, like I said, it's taking the fan experience of watching and enjoying sports, but then adding a game to it so that there's a little bit more engagement and, you know, strategy and skills. So it's sort of the more research and data that you're able to break down, the better, the more like advantages you have in the game. And it's evolved, you know, it started as these, what we call the rotisserie leagues, which are sort of like the full season where you have a sport, to take, you know, American football, right? And you have your team, and then each week you compete against another fantasy team, and, you know, you go for the full season and then you win. And then there was the emergence, you know, a little while ago of what we call daily fantasy sports, where it's a different game model, and that's really blown up and has grown pretty significantly. So ultimately, it's, if you're a fan of sports, it's a way to just have like an extra level of gamification and fun, of being a fan. And then the pain points that you have with fantasy is it's twofold. There's two sides to it, because one, there's the platform side, and you're dealing with you know, a few centralized platforms, and there is like a financial mechanism in there where you're earning money. This happens with like daily fantasy sports, and there are limitations because ultimately you're subjected to, you know, their decisions of like, you know, chasing down the money, getting paid. Like there are a lot of problems with that, and a lot of pain points there. And then you know, a large number of people who play fantasy sports play, like I said, in these sort of smaller leagues with their friends, and where that happens, you know, you have someone who's then taking on the role of managing the game, right? The league, if you think even in the, you know, in tabletop gaming, it's like the dungeon master, in Dungeons and Dragons. And they are collecting the money from everyone that pays to join the league. They're managing the disputes, you know, it's just like, and then they have to determine like, okay, who won, and then paying out the money at the end of the year. There's just a lot of, it is a very cumbersome process. And ultimately, in order to do it, you have to then use these like big platforms, and, you know, there are pain points with those. And so what immediately we saw with Web3 and how Web3 could be applied was the opportunity to use smart contracts to automate the like collection and management of the like dues and rewards of fantasy leagues. But there's also this component of, with fantasy sports, there's this concept called dynasty leagues, where what it is normally when you play, you have your players for the duration of the season. The season ends, your team is done, and then next year you start over again, and you start from scratch. Dynasty leagues are a mechanism that were created that allow you to hold on to some players between years. So if you know you're going to play fantasy football with the same group of people next year, your league kind of continues. So then you have some players that are still yours, and you don't have to pick a whole new set of players from scratch. But you still ultimately don't have any real control over that, over those players. And so tokenization presents an opportunity where the users can actually, and participants can actually own their players and own their teams. And that was really exciting, because that's where you combine this idea of like collectibles and trading cards with the actual game itself. And so where a lot of sports collectibles and NFTs are just collectibles, what I was excited about was how do you then incorporate into the game? So they're your players that you actually use to set your roster and to compete and earn, you know, rewards each week, as opposed to just like holding on to and appreciating, you know, or hopefully appreciating in value over time. So that's one, I mean, the big area where, you know, using smart contracts to handle the scoring and to avoid any like disputes around that scoring, rankings, reward distribution, but then also by tokenizing the players, now the user has more control over that player, and they can do different things. You can go and sell them on the open market, right? Or you can hold on to it and use them year after year. And then the last thing is, like I mentioned at the outset, this element of DeFi too. And this is where we get into like the larger conversation about play to earn gaming and sustainability and sustainable play to earn models. What we've done is actually incorporated DeFi so that that your entry fees, right, the dues that you pay to join the league, which become the rewards that the winning teams get. Traditionally, you pay them and then they just sit in someone's bank account, right? And they're not doing anything for the duration of the whole season, which is several months. So we've actually incorporated a mechanism where we take the like entry fees and our contracts stake them into a yield strategy. So, via a DeFi protocol. So they're actually generating yield while they're sitting there so that the reward pool increases. And it also creates it so like what you're competing for each week is like a share of the yield that's generated. So it's actually a more sustainable play and earn model because we're not just paying people in the league token and diluting that token, and we're also not subsidizing it just from our treasury, which is where a lot of the Web2 fantasy games, and if you look at their quarterly reports, statements, a lot of them are, very few of them are actually generating net profits because their cost of user acquisition is so high, and they have to subsidize they have to subsidize early winnings and for a lot of users, and that's how they get people to stick around and keep playing. Is they need them to win something and get a free game early on. But that's just it's ultimately not that sustainable because you're just paying so much to acquire these users, and it's coming out of their funds, right? So we can reward and incentivize participants using DeFi in a way where we're not paying for the DAO isn't paying for it itself. So that's the other. There is like this larger element of by Web3 fantasy sports creates an opportunity for a more sustainable fantasy gaming experience overall.
Well, it looks like you, knowing all the major problems of the fantasy sports and the real world, you took all the major components, all the set of solutions, I would say so, set of components of Web3, DAO framework, tokens, DeFi, and put it all together and created LeagueDAO, the DAO from scratch. Mm-hmm. So how to explain what is LeagueDAO? Why do you choose DAO framework from the beginning, not in the process of refactoring how you do, and how the LeagueDAO works in general, in simple terms?
Yeah, so I mean the DAO component of LeagueDAO, and I'll say that part of why I wanted to launch LeagueDAO as a DAO first entity is because I'm also just very interested in the evolution of decentralized governance and different types of entity structure, as opposed to just going the traditional startup route, even Web3 startups, where you have one centralized entity that owns everything, and then you might release a token and set up voting, but it's still really just held by one underlying entity. And ultimately, that would probably have been an easier approach. But I am excited, and I know Tyler, co-founder, he's launched several DAOs as well. Excited by the emergence and the evolution of decentralized governance and new types of organization structures. And it isn't for everyone. It doesn't make sense for a lot of projects, but we wanted to further this, and it is a grand experiment in a lot of ways, which is what so much of Web3 is at this stage. Right, when we say we're all early, it's because we're still experimenting with so much, and things are changing every day, and models that worked a year ago don't necessarily work today because community and sentiment and technology has changed. So we were really excited. I was excited by this model and how to approach this way as a DAO from day one. And what we did was it started with what we called sort of our launch DAO, where we used an Aragon DAO sort of company template. And we did that while we were bootstrapping the DAO and raising initial funding. And then what we did was ultimately fork and launch an iteration of what started as the Barnbridge DAO, for the DeFi protocol Barn Bridge, which is an open source governance protocol. And that had been forked by Universe.xyz, that DAO, and then also the Enter DAO. And so there is this little community of projects that have been using this DAO framework and adding to it and learning from it. And specifically, it's this governance protocol. And that's I think the key to what makes it a DAO first is that governance application. And so we deployed that along with our, what I kind of refer to now as our ecosystem token, because it serves a larger role than just being a tool for governance at this stage, the League ERC20 token. And the governance protocol is set up so that revenue that we collect from our products goes to the treasury in that protocol, it's held by the protocol, and then requires a vote, a vote by the community to disperse those funds. And that's how you really get that sort of, are you truly a DAO? Is if, I think, where you need that community, consensus in order to make these sort of larger decisions about how you utilize the treasury that the DAO is generating and collecting. And so, it's like I think any DAO, it really sort of, you start a little bit more centralized and then you become more decentralized. I think it's just also as like early stage startup, that's just part of what happens. So, there's kind of like an evolving process. And I think part of that is where you really get a sense of who the core community is and not the people that are just coming and looking to make a quick buck on a token. And that takes a little bit of time, but then, we've settled in a place where we have a framework where it starts with, key discussions moving, someone might bring something up in our Discord server where a lot of the main activity takes place. And then it moves to our forum where it's more of like a recorded, more kind of formal discussion. And then from the forum, we then set up a snapshot vote. And then if it's something that it rises to the level of needing to be recorded on chain in the DAO, usually that's when it's, a big component there, because there's a cost of voting and all that sort of stuff. Then you then elevate it to an actual on chain DAO vote. But what we try to do is, where we feel like things are impact sort of core pieces of the DAO itself, that's where we will have a forum post and then move it to a snapshot vote, like any things relating just like the utility of our token, right, and stuff like that. So it's an evolving process. I don't think any DAO has it. There's no one clear structure and format for that. But I think the key thing for us is that it incentivizes us to be extra transparent with the community, but also we get a lot more value and input out of the community as well. And that's something that I think a lot of Web2 startups, you really struggle and work to try and get early adopters to give you data and feedback. And I think, especially for an early stage DAO, that's where the community, if you're really engaging with them the right way, you're getting so much data and so much input and so much feedback. And that's the most invaluable thing you can do, because that helps you be as smart and effective with the products you're building, right? And either validate or invalidate the assumptions that the core team and developers have made about your features and all that sort of stuff. So that I think that's also a big piece of the DAO component is, we have a mechanism where we have a community of people that are incentivized to be a part of it. And because of that, we have, we have different working groups, we have different kind of sub communities that are all weighing in and helping us build this, our protocols, and to make them as effective as really, I guess, as good as they could be.
Well, I totally agree with you that community matters first, especially for DAO framework projects. So regarding community management, how large is LeagueDAO community now? How do you manage it? How do you prefer to manage it? Maybe any tips of life hacks? How do you plan to grow this?
Yeah, so we, our Discord is, several thousand people, but I would say, there's always going to be different tiers of community. There are And I think what you'll find, and you find this with any project that launches a DAO, right? Like even just like a PFP, like NFT project, it's eventually you're going to get to a space where it's sort of, it comes down to kind of like a core subgroup of that community that are really active. And so then it's engaging with them and really understanding, where their interest is and where, how they might be able to bring value. I think one of the key things that we've also done is we try to look to the community when we're trying to fill a new role. It's looking to the community first. So that way we're bringing people that are already like a part of the community and adding them to the team. And I think that sends the right message and also allows for a more authentic engagement. So like our Discord community manager is originally was just someone who was a part of the community and was active and really, chiming in and using our beta products and really involved. And we knew that we needed someone who could spend, devote more time to just sort of community management. And so that's where we put out the call, and our community manager came up, and he's been, amazing, and he's a really great resource for us. So I think that's a big part. We also, maybe it's a little excessive, but we host weekly project calls slash AMAs in Discord. And so we record them and release the videos. We do those every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. And, those aren't necessarily, if you come in, it might not be, hundreds of people. It might be 10, 20 people tuning in one week. And that's fine, because that also lets us, actually, have the people that are in there weigh in and actually, join the conversation. So I think that the key is just really like having meaningful conversations and engagement and being open and transparent with the community. And I think that's how you get the most out of the community, as opposed to just sort of like operating with smoke and mirrors and, like sending sort of like hopium all the time. I think you have to kind of be honest about it, especially like where we are right now in the market. And, we're not in what people would we're not, it's not like it's 2018 again, right? Or 2019 in the whole ecosystem, but we're in a bit of like, there are bearish signs to the market right now. And I think that's where it becomes more important to have like a real authentic relationship with your community, because, you're going to see the people, it's like during the bear markets is when the protocols that are really building, the people really devoted to the space come through. But that's also where in projects we really see who like your core supporters are and who aren't just looking for, some alpha and a quick buck. And then you find ways to incentivize them. I think for us, we've used a platform. We're using DWork is the name of the platform, which is a tool that's easy for us to set up bounties. So even just like we have our weekly our AMAs, and setting up a weekly bounty for someone to take notes, and and like you just find things like that aren't these massive things that only a skilled developer could do in terms of bounties, but like smaller things that are opportunities for the community to kind of to feel like they're getting something and being a part and keeping them engaged. So I think that's kind of the key. But in terms of your other part of the question was growth and how do you grow that community, and I think that's a like its own conversation. It's a challenge, right? Because I'm not that interested in just like scaling for the sake of scaling, and then you have 20,000 people in the Discord, but only 1% of those are actually engaging and like utilizing the products. I think for us, we have if on its face the numbers are smaller, but we have a really solid engagement. And you look at our products and the actual like fantasy leagues, and we have several hundred, a good amount of people using them and actually like engaging in staking players and buying players. And it's not, and I think that's more meaningful than just like a big flashy numbers. And then because I would say for any product in the web, for any startup, any product anywhere, Web 2 or Web 3, the first and most important thing is proving product market fit and finding product market fit. And then once you have product market fit, then scale comes at a much lower cost, right? And it becomes easier to grow. And so I would say where we are is focusing on product market fit. And I think there are a lot of Web3 companies that don't necessarily, they focus on just like community and marketing and audience first, but not product market fit. And then they run into problems where it's like, okay, well, what now? It's like I think that's, to me, like the most sustainable approach is to focus on like building the right products and making sure that you're providing value and an experience that people are going to enjoy. And when you do that, things will grow organically.
Definitely. From my point of view, LeagueDAO has one significant advantage. You deal with existing community of dozens of millions fans of fantasy sports. This is a great advantage because the vast majority of another Web3 project, they create product first, then we need to grow our community, where to seek our community members, and so on and so forth. And does this help you into onboarding ordinary people from the real world into Web3? Is this concept of LeagueDAO helpful for this conversion, more onboarding people from real world to Web3?
I think it definitely helps. So like I said at the outset, my background is in entertainment, and I worked at a company where we were building the video on demand platform, like Web3 video on demand platform. And I spent a lot of time, because a lot of my role was going and building partnerships with content owners and creators and film and media companies. And so I spent a lot of time, one, just like educating these companies on what blockchain is, right? And how, what smart contracts are, and like, how do you create a wallet, right? Like, how do you transfer crypto from one wallet to another wallet? How do you convert crypto to fiat? Like these basic onboarding matters. And I think that experience was invaluable for me because I come to Web3 and I'm in Web3 with this sort of a little bit of a hedge, right? A little bit of I'm thinking about, and I've just collected so much data from people on why they aren't using Web3 tools and where they get stuck, that for us, we know that we need to, so I say that because we have to think about, when we're building our products, we have to be thinking long-term in terms of, there's like the short-term degens, like crypto natives. And that's where maybe if we had deployed things and sold our player NFTs on ETH mainnet, right? It's like, that's where those people are buying most of their NFTs. And, that's where a lot of the market is and this and that. But ultimately we decided to go out the gates on Polygon because we know that we need to be on a layer 2 in order to have a smoother user experience for people who aren't as crypto savvy. So we're always thinking in terms of, how do we create a user experience that essentially lets people participate and get the benefits of Web3 and tokenization without them feeling like they're using a blockchain application, right? So they don't have to feel like they need to understand all of the different nuances and like the facets of Web3 in order to utilize our tools. But we know that if we can achieve that, so how our games work is, you mint your players, you have which are NFTs, and then you stake your players in our app to set your lineup, and then you claim your rewards at the end of the week based on how those players that are staked perform. Now, if you take those actions, if you understand how to do that, you know how to use DeFi, right? Like that's the core flow. And so there's a really big opportunity in terms of onboarding, but I think the key thing is, how do we make it just as easy as possible? So for us, we spend a lot of time focusing on, okay, what is our onboarding flow? How do we make that as easy and smooth as possible while still giving people the level of control and ownership that we think is important? And so, we're working right now in terms of incorporating a fiat on-ramp so that, it is smoother and easier for people to be able to join, and use our products without having to already have crypto in a wallet, things like that. These are things that we're looking at as essential, as opposed to, oh, it'd be nice if we had this down the road. So I think that's where, it does make our jobs harder, but I think fantasy sports also helps because there's a very clear UI structure and user experience with fantasy sports. So we can replicate that and create something that people are comfortable with and it feels familiar to them. And I think that by doing that, it helps onboard new people. We launched one of the protocols. We've actually launched several protocols, like different fantasy sports products, and it's been under a year since we launched. So, in the past 8 months, one of them, we launched it in March. It's called non-fungible brackets. And this is basically decentralized, and tokenized way of creating bracket-based tournaments. So we launched the first one with March Madness, which is in the US, the NCAA men's basketball tournament, which is a very big event in the US where, there's 64 teams playing. It's a single elimination tournament. And a lot of people, and it's a big cultural moment to go and fill out your bracket. So you go and pick the winners of every single match until you have you pick the champion. And then you earn points based on whether or not you pick the correct winner of a game. And that application, we built it in the UI so that if you were to go onto Yahoo or ESPN or wherever and filled out a March Madness bracket, it's the same user experience essentially as going to non-fungible brackets and filling out a bracket there. The only difference is that final last mile checkout process. And I think the key indicator for me was that I was able to get my 65-year-old mother to be able to fill out and mint a bracket for non-fungible brackets, because we focused on making a user experience that familiar for people and that they understood because they've done it before in Web 2. And so by doing that, it helped us onboard people. Of course, other hurdles that we have, but I think that's a key component to it, so that we always take into account.
Non-fungible tokens, or NFTs, are the crucial component of LeagueDAO. How specifically NFTs are utilized in the concept of LeagueDAO in general? Yeah,
so we use them in a couple different ways. The primary way is within our actual main protocol, our fantasy leagues, where each individual athlete is tokenized as an NFT, and it's a dynamic NFT. So that NFT is then updated each week with the stats from that player, and is the mechanism by which we are able to assign points to users, or based on the stats generated by the player represented by the NFT. And by tokenizing the players, we're giving the users more control and more ownership over that team and the players. And we have, so our first protocol, which is called the Nomo leagues, and that's sort of what we call this ultimate keeper, this ultimate dynasty league, where for football, we released one NFT per player in the NFL, in the American Football League. And if you minted that player, you own them forever. So you can continue to stake them and use them in the game as long as they're still playing in the league. And you can at any point go and sell them or trade them or what have you, but you control and earn points off of, earn rewards in Dive based on which players you actually hold. And you can hold them for a long time, however long as you want. So that's where tokenizing that player becomes very important. We also, on the other end, use this mechanism for non-fungible brackets, where we're taking your pool, your bracket that you've filled out, and we're tokenizing that. So the bracket is an NFT itself too. And again, that's also a way for you to have more control over it. We can incorporate mechanisms that let you update the bracket mid-tournament by paying a fee to do that. And that's something that Web 2 you can't do. But you also, you just have more control and more ownership over it. But then these dynamic NFTs then connect and are informed by our like core infrastructure of the smart contracts that actually power the league and the oracle that we've built to pull the real world data and put it on chain so that we're influencing the on-chain activity by these real world events.
I'm personally super excited with the concept of non-fungible tokens because every lawyer knows that all the entire world exists. The vast majority of things are existing in the unique form. So possible everything in the world, in a real world and in a digital world, of course, may be represented and will be represented in the form of non-fungible token. So how do you see the potential of NFT as a tool for tokenizing everything around us? How do you see the potential? How NFT will change our world? How do we live? How do we do business in, let's say, 5 or 10 years? You have any thoughts?
I mean, I'm a believer in that it's going to end up being a mix of non-fungible tokens and fungible tokens, right? And ERC20 tokens. So it's like, I don't think one is the end all solution. I think it takes a hybrid of them because you have different experiences and different interactions. And so it depends on that interaction. So for example, we have a mechanism we're part of for our fantasy football league, sort of what we're calling version 2, or the branding name we've dubbed it the Mega League. We have a mechanism where you mint an NFT that we call a league pass. That pass is your entry point to then register as an owner of a team. So now you're in the league and can now participate. But what we also do is then transfer to the holder of that league pass ERC20 tokens that are really just utility tokens. There's no dollar value tied to them, but we call them draft league tokens. So each ERC20 token represents one pick in your player draft. So let's say you get 20 draft league tokens, and then when we have the player draft, you're purchasing the players by exchanging one D League token for the player. So it's this combination of the NFT and the ERC20 token that allow us to create this decentralized experience that previously was just only centralized in via Web2. So I think that's my sort of take on it, especially coming from the intellectual property and media world, where you have a very complex set of rights and percentages and ownership shares. And that complexity to me is best adapted and handled via, a mix of, ERC20 tokens and NFTs, just because of how you're able to break up the ownership structure and divide the ownership structure and things like that. And of course, there are components of fractionalized NFTs, which are emerging more and more. But I still think, I still think it's going to have to be a hybrid of NFTs and ERC20 tokens, depending on the use case.
Well, I especially love our episode today because I really love to talk to, I would call NFT focused DAO, because LeagueDAO is NFT focused DAO, and Envelop project I represent, it also DAO, it's super DAO, it consists of micro DAOs. It's also NFT focused because it develops a sort of wrapping protocol. I don't know if you are familiar. I would say it's quite simple. The wrapping protocol, wrapping concept, allows NFT to use NFT as a sort of a major container where you may put another cryptocurrency inside, and the price becomes predictable, and enter this container a lot of new functionality, new features such as collateral inside, on-chain royalties, time lock, and so on and so forth. So this concept is quite useful in dozens of use cases everywhere. We don't even see all the potential. How do you, if you're familiar with the concept, do you find this concept useful theoretically for the purposes of LeagueDAO? Because you'll utilize NFT in a lot of cases. Maybe find the common points of connection.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, that the type of these kind of packaged or bundled, and not bundled because that implies something different, but these are wrapped NFTs. And I think that it opens up a lot of possibilities. And it's something that we were looking at in terms of the exact flow that I just described in terms of the league pass and the draft league tokens, where you have this combination of an NFT and ERC20 tokens. we ultimately, from just like an architecture standpoint, decided to go in a different direction. But that was something that I was spending a lot of time thinking about was, if you create this sort of time lock or action locked vesting, right, where it's only once you redeem your league pass that you can then, like, each league pass is embedded with the draft league tokens that you need. And then when you redeem that league pass, that also unlocks the draft league tokens, so you can then use them in the league. So then we don't have to send people, like airdrop the draft league tokens to users, and it just takes a level of complexity off the table. I think that's a really interesting element there. I think it's also from the NFT standpoint, there's like the rewards and how you incentivize and simplify rewards, because we have, there's a lot of programs that we work with where create like little tournaments and pools and competitions. And that's what we've really built our protocols to be something so that other communities can go and launch their own tournament on using LeagueDAO's protocols, or launch their own fantasy league on LeagueDAO's fantasy protocol. So, or FantasySports protocol. And that's where, it does, the rewards oftentimes, especially when it's like a community doing this, they'll get other projects to donate some NFTs or some tokens. And so the prize is this like bundle of NFTs and tokens and these rewards. And by basically using the wrapped NFT as like a gift box, where it can hold all of these things, it makes it a lot easier and a lot smoother, and is just a better user experience and is more efficient. So I think that's a really compelling component, because then you're also just like, you're not sending 5 different things. You can then program the contract to just send this one wrapped NFT to the specific user, and that's far more efficient. To get into like the more macro stuff, I think wrapped NFTs also are interesting when you think about like liquidity pools, like LPs and liquidity pool incentives, and maybe time locking liquidity incentives. So people who users who add to a liquidity pool, they can claim a wrapped NFT that has a time lock or time release vesting of ERC20 tokens that are baked within it. There's a lot of interesting components and applications for that.
Well, thanks for your answer. About LeagueDAO plans for 2002, where are you on your roadmap now? What are your plans for this year? And maybe you need somebody, maybe you are hiring, and whatever you want to say about your plans.
Yeah, I think, our main focus right now is the start of the NFL season in September. We're in the midst of building out, and we'll be releasing version 2 of our fantasy football protocol, which is really enhancing the overall game experience and user experience. It's what I kind of referred to previously, called the mega league, where it's going to be really fun for everyone that participates, and is a smooth experience, but it's still using our core tokenomic models and decentralized infrastructure. So that's our big focus right now. We've sort of blown past our initial roadmap, and have built and released more protocols than we originally even planned we would. And so, in addition to the fantasy football league, we are also on our roadmap is the next sort of bigger moment for non-fungible brackets, which would be the World Cup pool and tournament. Which very much looking forward to. I guess it's advantageous for us that the World Cup is in November this year as opposed to during the summer, because it gives us a little bit of breathing room between the launch of the NFL season and when the World Cup starts. So that's our big focus. I think for us, we're always just looking for people to come and join the community. I think anyone who's in our community knows that we're always looking for ways to incentivize and to find people that are, that might bring value and help us with different aspects from the community. I think also one of the interesting things about being a DAO is it's less, we need to fill this role. A lot of it is people that are in the community then presenting ideas of what they can do for the DAO, and us saying, great, let's share it with the larger group. Let's present it, it's not this like, oh no, we're not doing that right now. It's like, let's have a public discussion about it and let the community weigh in. And so to anyone that has unique skills that they think could be helpful for us, whether it could be design and creative, it could be, you know, social media marketing, it could be developers, come in and you know, offer, you know, if you have ideas, present them. And that's how we've evolved to date, and part of what, you know, how we've built a lot of things we've built. So I would say that's kind of what we're looking for, is always just people that are interested in fantasy sports and Web3 and GameFi to come in and participate in the community. And we believe that if you do that, we'll make it worth your time.
Well, so finally, I have to ask you in this moment how to join the LeagueDAO, how to follow LeagueDAO was the best way to start be a member of LeagueDAO.
Perfect segue. We couldn't have planned it better. Yeah, so I would say, I mean, you can follow us on Twitter, which is just at LeagueDAO, one word. Also, if you go to our Twitter account, you'll find a link to our Discord. I mean, the Discord, again, it's, you know, if you go to discord.gg/LeagueDAO, that's how you get in the Discord server. I think Twitter and Discord are really the clear places. And then, like as I mentioned, we host our weekly project calls every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern in Discord. So you can tune into that. We also release the recordings, and you can listen to the recordings of our past project calls on YouTube. And then lastly, we also have our Medium account, and we have a bi-weekly newsletter. So we just released the latest edition of the newsletter. We call it the Field Report yesterday. And so that's where we have, you know, bigger updates in terms of LeagueDAO, what's going on, and then what we're building, and also just larger kind of GameFi Web3 news. We try to include that as well. And then lastly, the League ecosystem token or governance token, whatever you want to call it, LEAG, and that's I mean, you can look that up anywhere and find that. That's another entry point. It's trading just on SushiSwap right now.
I strongly suggest, ladies and gentlemen, to check the LeagueDAO Medium, because Jake Craven is a good writer. He loves to write big stories, and that's his talent. He's been doing greatly. I love to read their posts. So please, ladies and gentlemen, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, like, share, subscribe, join our Telegram, and Jake Craven, the co-founder of LeagueDAO, and Eugene Cryptocurrency, wherever you. Thank you for watching and listening. Be a part of Web3, join the Web3 movement. This is our world today, and this is how the Web3 set of tools has been disrupting for 13 years already, since Bitcoin been launched in January of 2009. Our world of Web2 and sports, our conservative realms. Thank you very much, Jake. It's been an extremely educational episode, and how LeagueDAO is great educational tool for the people from conservative Web2 world. The world of sports is the right way, right entry point to Web3. Wish you good luck, and we're staying tuned, and hope maybe we'll be parting soon. Who knows? Thank you very much.
Exactly. Thank you.
Bye-bye.